Well, no Jared Allen, no Kevin Love, no problem. The Cavaliers roll to a big win over the shorthanded Philadelphia 76ers, 113-85 in a game that sometimes didn't even feel that close. It's your Cavs Insider Postgame Report coming at you right now. Well, hey there, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on the Cavs Insider Postgame Report. John Rutter, Spencer German with you after a big Cavaliers win over the Philadelphia 76ers, 113-85. And as we mentioned, sometimes didn't even feel that close. The Cavaliers absolutely dominant, down a couple of guys in their lineup. Philadelphia, of course, down a couple of guys in their lineup as well. James Harden, Tyrese Maxey out. Joel Embiid did play, but the Cavaliers doing an incredible job at neutralizing him. And Spence, I guess that's where we start. Embiid missed 4 games with a foot injury before he came back Monday night, and he dropped 30 in that return. So it kind of looked like he was going to step back in and really pick up right where he left off. But man, can't say enough about the job that the Cavs did on him in the defensive end tonight.
Yeah, and obviously, you know James Harden, no Maxey. You're not getting the full strength 76ers, but even without that, I thought it was encouraging to see. Embiid's one of the best players in the league. We all know that, right? When he's healthy, when he's out there, he can take over a game. He can dominate. And meanwhile, the Cavs obviously missing most notably Jared Allen, a guy who would defend him normally in a matchup when he's playing, and you still were getting a great defensive effort from both Evan Mobley and also Mamadi Diakite. I think I nailed that. I was practicing before he jumped on. Who they were kind of like Mobley kind of had the main responsibility, but he would come over and kind of help a little bit. And I thought together they sort of showed a blueprint for how to defend him. And he scored, I think, 19. He was like 6 of 16 or whatever it was from the floor. Like, he didn't have his best game. So I thought even in a game where the 76ers aren't at full strength, it gave you a chance to kind of look, here's a way to defend this guy and kind of limit him and limit his ability out on the floor. He's going to get his baskets. He's still going to score. But, I was encouraged by that for sure. And I thought it speaks volumes to – I think this game tonight just speaks volumes to this Cavs team and what something we've hit on all year so far, just the depth that they have. They have a number of guys out, guys that are key to this roster and this team and the success they hope to have, but they're still finding ways to win, and they're finding ways in the case tonight to blow teams out.
Yeah.
And I kind of jokingly tweeted out, I think this fourth quarter lead is safe. They didn't have to worry about it tonight. And I don't even think Joel Embiid even played in the fourth quarter. So, yeah, it was an all-around good effort from a team that's missing some pieces, but definitely encouraging. And there's some things you can at least take away from this game when they do get back to full strength that you can kind of use when playing this team in maybe a higher stakes situation like a playoff series.
Yeah, they absolutely frustrated Joel Embiid. I think that you could see that. You touched on his shooting numbers as well. He also got the technical foul, and he just kind of didn't really look his comfortable self out there. You mentioned the Cavs throwing Evan Mobley out there on him. They did everything that they could to possibly frustrate him. And at first blush, when you look at that starting lineup and you see Mamadi Diakite in there in that starting 5, his first career start, and a guy who hasn't seen a whole lot of minutes, you might be kind of wondering, why is he in that role? But this is a long and lanky defender that JB has had a lot of good things to say about throughout training camp and the preseason, even though we haven't really seen a whole lot of him. His offensive game is kind of limited, but defensively, they really like what he brings to the table, and that was one of the reasons why he made the team coming out of training camp, and underscoring the fact that they were paying extra attention to Embiid inside the paint with no Maxey, with no James Harden. This team had three defensive 3-second calls in the first half. And that's something that the Cavs kind of take some pride in, getting those defensive 3-second calls. After the game, JB said that, like, look, and Darius said it, a couple other guys were asked about it, like, they kind of take pride in getting those. Like, they're going to clog up the paint. They're going to, take advantage of the fact that the officials are a little liberal with some of those calls sometimes. So they made it a point to clog up the paint, because they knew that was the only option that Philadelphia had, really the only option that Philadelphia had that could kill you, right? And they made Philadelphia beat you another way, and they weren't able to do that. So kudos to them for finding another way to pull it off tonight. Caris LeVert, another storyline and topic that we can touch on here. His role has evolved considerably, right, as the season has progressed. Won the starting small forward job, came off the bench tonight, 22 points. Is it just me, or does he seem more comfortable in that role?
It's funny you say that, because I was honestly thinking the same thing tonight. I know we keep going back to conversations we had leading into the season about who should be the starting three, and we tossed around some different ideas, and then we knew it ended up being LeVert, and we were like, okay, yeah, like I can understand this, I get why, but it does seem like, especially tonight, like coming off the bench, that he just like that in that second unit, he just kind of finds this role. At one point, I think he was like shooting. He had a perfect shooting percentage from the floor. I think it was like, I think he started like, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like 6 for 6, 7 for 7, something like that. And he finished the game 8 for 11. So, he seemed to really thrive in that, which I'll give him some credit, man. Like you see it in basketball all the time where guys have roles, and you kind of talk about that at the beginning of the year. Coaches make that pretty clear. But for a guy who started the year in a starting role with this group to then be so unselfish that now he's kind of in a different role as they've tried to sort of maneuver different lineups, finagle things, try some different things, and he's still just coming off and playing at a high level. I thought that was impressive. Obviously, he had the injury factored into there too, where he missed several games. So that obviously was a factor. But that word unselfishness, I think, just resonates throughout this team. Really, like, nobody seems to care who gets the credit. And I know that's a line that JB uses all the time. And I think that's why you have a guy like Caris LeVert who can accept sort of a lesser role in some ways and then thrive in it and put up 22 points tonight in a game where you didn't need Donovan Mitchell to go off like with an MVP caliber performance, 30 plus points, because you get that 22 points from a guy like Caris LeVert. Another example is, I think, Isaac Okoro, who, again, saw a decent night. I've already said on this podcast, I'm pumping the brakes. I'm not going to try to jump back onto that train just yet, because I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of like, well, what if this is the Isaac Okoro that we've been missing? But I do give him credit too, in that he had some quotes recently when he had some better performances where he talked about how, even though I struggled, like my teammates just kept believing in me, kept giving me opportunities. And, I made the most of those when I was out on the floor. And he started to look, I'll give him credit. Like he started to look a little bit better in recent games. I just can't fully buy and get back on the Isaac Okoro train. I think we kind of know what he is at this point. But yeah, I mean, all these guys, they seem to like really care about each other. They seem to just want to have success in the basketball court. And I think that's why you see, in a game where you're down several key players tonight, you can go out and blow out a team that has a superstar player on it in Joel Embiid, even though he's shorthanded as well. So I talked about this a little bit last year with this team. Tonight was one of those games where, with past Cavs teams, like the post LeBron leaving Cavs teams that were just bad, where you'd go play that team, they were shorthanded, didn't have Joel Embiid, and you'd still get blown out. But like now that's the opposite. Like that to me is almost like a measure of a good team, is like, yeah, you're missing some players, but you're going out and you're playing against a superstar player who you can take over and dominate you, and you're still winning that game. So I think that just speaks to how far this team's come and kind of where they're headed throughout this season, that we have obviously some high expectations for them.
That's a good point. And I think that some of these guys have even mentioned that at points throughout this season of like, look, we kind of gave some games away last year, and we're trying to really dial in for a full 82. and not have that. And I think that that's one of the reasons why we've seen some of the comeback wins that we've
Yeah.
seen so far this season. Like they just know that they're going to be there for a full 48 no matter what it takes. And all they need is a little opening to make a run and to make a game of it. And I think that that's another, tonight is another illustration of that, where, that could have been an opportunity for them to come in. And potentially have Embiid come in and take over a game like that. I'm curious to find out what the Philadelphia coaching staff had to say after this game. I didn't hear any comments myself, obviously, because I was in the Cavs media room, but I did hear some comments. There were some rumblings from a few other fellow media members about maybe some things that the Philly coaching staff said, maybe calling this one a scheduled loss. I'm not sure I'm buying that one. Specifically since they're on the front end of a back-to-back instead of a back end. But, I guess maybe they were expecting the Cavaliers to come in with a little extra motivation in this game. And that's kind of how it played out tonight. Regardless of, have to wait and see, go back and look through those comments. But you have to love the effort that this team put forth tonight.
Speaking of scheduled losses, I know we didn't get a chance, obviously, to connect Monday after the Cavs back-to-back. Which, by the way, we talk about sort of wins that you wouldn't see from old Cavs teams. That win against the Pistons on Sunday, I think, speaks to that too. Like another situation where you're shorthanded, you go play a team that you probably should beat, but they're putting up some numbers against you, they're winning, and then you actually end up eking that game out. Past Cavs teams would have lost that game, but this team has the depth and the talent to sort of, not to say they were coasting, but they probably went into that one knowing like, hey, we're going to be shorthanded, but I think we can still beat this team without these guys. And they ended up pulling it out. But then you bring up scheduled losses, which is, I think, some of what you get with that Raptors game on Monday, which is unfortunate because that's a team that I think could be a playoff series matchup for you at some point. And you get them on the second night of a back-to-back, shorthanded as well. So you don't really get a chance to see more of how that game could go when you're both at full strength. And the last time you played that team was literally opening night of the season, very much still figuring things out at that point. And then they went on the streak they went on, but they're a measuring stick for you, I guess, in some ways. And I just think like right now, that team is such a mismatch. They just don't match up well against Toronto. I think that's probably part of it too. They have obviously Fred VanVleet, but then all their guys, it just seems like have this massive wingspan where they can just like defend the lanes and keep guys like Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell from cutting to the basket, making those plays at the rim. And I think that just kind of is a problem in terms of like slowing things down and limiting what they want to try to do. So they're sort of a defensive mismatch and really just a mismatch in general. And I think that's a little bit of what we've seen from those first two games against Toronto to this point as well.
Sure. And, not to put words in anybody's mouth, but in talking with some of the guys and, some of the coaches and some of the media members when we were up there for that opening night game where Darius got hurt, 13 minutes in. So then you're down your top point guard as well. But the big takeaway was from a lot of folks there was how physical Toronto was. Like I don't know, maybe they weren't necessarily prepared for that or expecting that, or maybe expecting it that early in the season, but everybody talked about how physical Toronto was. And I think that really kind of took its toll. And you want to talk about playoff basketball, that's going to kind of really lend its hand right into a playoff series, because you're going to expect a big physical series when you're got two Eastern Conference powerhouses that you expect to be there come April and May. So that's something to keep our eyes on. And I'm kind of with you. I was hoping to maybe get a little bit better barometer on how to feel about about those games, because I think that I saw the graphic before the game. Cavs are 5-7, I believe, on the road. 4 of those losses are to Milwaukee. 2 of them are to Milwaukee, 2 of them to Toronto. So there's 4 of your 7 losses that you've got there on the road.
That's a good point. It's one of those things that I think, like in the back of your head, we all kind of knew they've had some issues on the road, but it doesn't. I'm not like thinking about that at the forefront of my mind right now. But you bring that up, and you're like, okay, so they got some maybe issues on the road. I know JB had talked about once they kind of got things back on track after the losing streak after the West Coast trip, that he feels confident they can take some of what they fixed and take it on the road and play better. And we saw a little bit of that with the Pistons game. And to be fair, like, they didn't play terrible in the Toronto game. They had some really nice looks. It felt like one of those nights truly where the shots just weren't falling. Like, they had some open looks and they just weren't dropping in the basket. And you're going to get those games. And you do wonder sometimes if maybe you bring up the physicality of Toronto, maybe that plays into that a little bit. Like, they're so physical with you that sometimes it like throws you off your game a little bit and the shots just don't fall. But I still don't think to this point we've gotten that true barometer test of how this team matches up with that team at full strength when you play them opening night and you play them shorthanded on the second night of a back-to-back. So I think they are a mismatch right now. That could maybe change later in the season. Maybe there's a trade to be made at some point for Cleveland, which we've hit on a couple times. But now we found as for Cleveland. Sorry, you got me.
You're cutting out a little bit there on in that last response there, but yeah, it certainly kind of seems like it could potentially be a mismatch there. So we're hoping to maybe iron out the kinks there with both your internet connection and against the Raptors here moving forward. We'll bring this up as well, too, because JB was asked about this in pregame. We are officially now, after tonight, 22 games into the season. The Cavaliers at 14-8. I don't think that they necessarily had a benchmark for what they wanted to be at the quarter pole of the season, 20 some odd games into it. These guys have said that they didn't have a specific record in mind of where they wanted to be. They just wanted to be or have some evidence that they are playing some winning basketball. And JB was asked today what his evaluation of his team was so far into the season. He said, like, look, we're still a little bit of a work in progress. There's a lot to like about this team, but there's a lot that he still wants to tinker with and to figure out. And I think that maybe the biggest takeaway that you can have from that is I think that this was the 10th different starting lineup that the Cavs have rolled out this season through 22 games. So, like, when we talk about streakiness and poor shooting nights and maybe a lack of chemistry and struggling to close things out some nights, like, if you look at the whole body of work, 14-8, you'd probably take that after 22 games, right? If you told me that at the beginning of the season, especially if you told me Darius Garland was probably going to miss 5 games with an injury, and maybe we're kind of having a little bit more of a knee-jerk reaction because we're riding this every night with every win and every loss. But the fact that they still really haven't had a full chance to get a good string of games together with what we think could be potentially their starting 5 or even the core 4, as you always refer to. I think that we're still kind of waiting to see what that really looks like.
Yeah, I think sort of the way we maybe want to talk about this before we jumped on, we were kind of discussing this, is like, give me something at the quarter pole that you look at with this team and you feel like really good about, and then give me something that like you're a little bit concerned with. For me, like on the concerning side of things, you bring up the 10th different lineup that we've seen. And they've played all of 24 games now, I think it is, or 22 games now.
14-8.
What'd you say?
14-8 after tonight, so 22 games.
So 22 games. And that's kind of a vast, 10 different lineups in only 22 games. Like, that's a lot.
Right. When you say it like that, you're like, oh wow, like 22 games, and they've had 10 different, like every other game pretty much they're rolling out a different starting lineup.
And I do think that's where I'm kind of looking, because like there's been some great performances from that 3 spot when they've inserted Dean Wade or they've inserted Lamar Stevens, or obviously Caris LeVert had some great games early in the season when he was in that role. And, obviously we brought up earlier tonight, Mamadi Diakite, he obviously started tonight and made some plays and did some nice things, but he's not really this offensive juggernaut that you're going to keep out there every night either. So I think just the inconsistency from that position and the inconsistency in lineups and like what this is really going to look like when you're making a playoff run is kind of a question that I still have. And we talk about certain teams that maybe are mismatches for you, and really this parlays into another point I was going to make, which was the Cavs are, I think, bottom 10 in the league in terms of opponent 3-point shooting allowed. And listen, we already understand with Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, two undersized guards, they're going to have some issues defensively. Like they're not going to be the best defenders, but that's where I think if you get you maybe go out at the deadline and get a guy who can be a defensive threat for you, but also be a scoring threat for you, maybe that helps that a little bit, because I think that's been an issue so far this season, and it's something that you maybe find that role and find a more consistent player in that role that helps you down the stretch of a season. So I think that's maybe the biggest thing I'm concerned with is just their inconsistencies with lineups. And I know, again, it's early. I'm not trying to say you can't still try to feel it out and that JB doesn't have a right to sort of change things up and try different things and plug different things in. This is totally the time of year you want to do that. But I just wonder like what sticks and when we kind of figure that out.
Yeah, no, I think that if you're looking for kind of a question, and that's kind of the resounding question that we've really been asking throughout these first 22 games, is like who's going to take that role and run with it, right? Like there's plenty of internal options that we really haven't seen stick yet, and then we saw yet another combination where Dean gets the start in that 3 position. You have Mamadi at the 4, and then Evan Mobley there at the center in place of Jarrett Allen. I wonder, and we can probably bring this up in another week or two, but how Ricky Rubio factors into all this. Saw him shooting again today before the game, in pregame. He wasn't wearing any brace or anything on the knee. I'm not sure if that's just because he was working out light beforehand, but I'm anxious to see how he impacts this team, because I like to listen to the broadcast as I'm watching the game there, kind of in the press row. And I did hear that they were talking about the Cavs playing with the second slowest pace in the NBA. And I think that that's striking, particularly tonight, because they had a lot of points on the fast break, right? But I think that that's kind of surprising when you have guys like Darius and Donovan in your backcourt. And I know that that was a point of emphasis and a point of pride for the Cavs when Rubio was available last year. I wonder how that comes into play once he's reinserted into the lineup when he fully recovers from the ACL injury.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. We know how important he was from like a leadership standpoint for this team last year. We think he's probably going to sort of be the general, that second unit. And also just like how he was having a great year before he got hurt last year too. So it's like, how effective will he be to coming off the knee injury? But and listen, maybe that's part of the equation that we're not factoring in here too, which is like you're still waiting to get guys back and see where they fit and what their roles are. So that's why I mean, like, I can't blame JB for trying different things and seeing what kind of works and what sticks. But yeah, I think that there's certainly there's some eeriness there in terms of what that's going to look like. And, I kind of just want like more consistency in that role once we get deeper into the season, which I think we'll get at some point, but it's just kind of figuring it out. We can end on a positive of, something that we're encouraged by. I think an obvious answer to this question is Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah.
Early returns on him have been, he's worth every single penny that they forked over in the trade, for all the first round picks in the world that they gave up. Very much been worth it to this point. I do think too, and maybe over the course of the last like week or so, him and Donovan playing with each other well has been encouraging.
Yeah.
And I kind of go back to that Golden State game where Donovan had a really good game and Darius was struggling a little bit, and down the stretch of the season, or down the stretch of the game rather, he was kind of looked at to like take over in the fourth quarter, and he just wasn't hitting the shots. He just did not have a good night. And people started questioning like, well, should he even have the ball in his hands late in games? Like, should he be more of a facilitator, Mitchell more of the scorer? And in recent games, it's felt like it's kind of been interchangeable. Like some nights DG could take over, some nights Mitchell could take over in that spot late in the game. And I'm encouraged by the fact that they are just seem to be rolling on all cylinders, playing very well off of each other, which is exactly what you hoped for when you went and got them. So I'm really encouraged by that. I think there's obviously some improvements that need to be made on the perimeter, especially from the defensive end, like I alluded to. But from the offensive standpoint, like I don't think you could ask for much more with those two guys up top running the offense. And, we've seen what obviously Evan Mobley and Jared Allen can do for 2 years now inside. But yeah, I think that's some of the things that I look at and feel really good about at this point in the season.
No Kevin Love tonight. He's still recovering from the fractured thumb. He did try to give it a go right after the injury actually happened and didn't really look like himself. And we haven't seen him since. No Jarrett Allen tonight as well.
I feel like why'd they even play him? Like
he said he wanted to go. And I think that maybe he kind of got the veteran courtesy there that he was going to give it a shot. JB said tonight it's kind of like just a pain management situation that they're in right now. Obviously they need Kevin for his shooting, his passing. And now, he's a guy that steps up on the defensive end, getting a little physical, withdrawing charges. So things can, you don't want to bang that around in the wrong direction or the wrong situation and worsen that injury. So they don't want to put him in a position where he's not able to protect himself and protect that thumb. So that's kind of where we are with evaluating Kevin. And Jarrett, obviously, with the now listed as a back contusion. So the sooner that they can get JA back, the better, obviously, because we know the impact that he has. Looking forward to the Magic on Friday, another team that's kind of towards the bottom of the standings. We talk about opportunities to beat teams that you should. You have another one on Friday night, and Spence, I'll leave you with this. For as much as they have looked out of sorts, looked uncomfortable on the road this season, the Cavaliers now 9-1 at Rocket Mortgage FieldHouse with a chance to run that to 10-1 Friday night. Third best home mark in the NBA.
Yeah, it's awesome. And especially for these fans who I know definitely a lot of people packing that arena now after the trade for Mitchell, and it certainly has paid dividends. So it's good to see Rocket Mortgage FieldHouse rocking again. And I'm glad that, there's clearly a little home cooking going when you have the crowd on your side and they're feeding off of that. So if we can get that same sort of vibes going on the road, that'd be awesome for this team. But for the time being, it's encouraging that they are playing so well at home and giving the home fans something to be excited about. So I got to imagine they keep that rolling on Friday. We'll see. The Orlando's gonna, they're gonna be a tough team. They don't really roll over in games that they play. We'll see what happens. But definitely, the home is not the issue. It's we got to see if they can keep it up on the road. But definitely excited for that one on Friday.
Friday night, Orlando in town at Rocket Mortgage FieldHouse. We will talk to you more about that matchup throughout the week. Hopefully going to have Jake Chapman on as well. Tried to connect with him last time that the Magic were in town. Weren't able to do it. A fellow U92 or a fellow 92 through the Fanner over there. U92 is my college radio station, so I kind of interchange them fairly frequently. But we'll try to catch up with Jake, maybe get some perspective on the other side, what we can expect from the Magic. And get some good stuff for you as we get ready for that game on Friday night. For Spencer German, I'm John Rutter. Cavaliers, a 113-85 winner over the Philadelphia 76ers. We appreciate you watching the Cavs Insider Postgame Report. Cavs and Magic coming at you Friday at the Fieldhouse.